step back from the door. We've got reports of illegal activity.
You're at the wrong house. Do you have a warrant?
This is the address we were given. You need to comply right now. Keep your hands where I can see them.
I'm an elected county sheriff. I can show you my badge.
Do not reach for anything.
It's just my badge. It's in my jacket.
Turn around. Hands behind your back, now.
The Axon body cam footage doesn't start with shouting or chaos. It starts with movement. A steady, purposeful walk down a narrow apartment hallway just as the morning light begins to leak in through frosted windows at the far end. The camera bobs slightly with each step, the rhythm of boots against cheap carpet audible beneath controlled breathing. It is early, just after 6, the kind of hour when most people are either asleep or moving slowly, still wrapped in the safety of routine. On the body cam timestamp, the seconds tick forward calmly, unaware of how badly the next few minutes are about to go. The officers do not pause long in front of the door. Apartment numbers are visible, but no one double-checks them against paperwork. No radio call confirms the unit. No knock echoes through the hallway. The decision has already been made. The report said illegal activity. The address sounded right. That is enough. A shoulder dips out of frame, followed by a sharp crack as wood splinters and the door gives way. The camera lurches forward, catching a blur of broken frame, swinging hinges, and dim interior light as the officers flood inside with authority they have not yet earned. Inside the apartment, everything feels ordinary. Too ordinary for what is supposed to be happening. A small entryway opens into a living area where a couch sits neatly against the wall and a pair of shoes rest by the door. There is no scrambling, no running footsteps, no frantic movement. Instead, a man stands a few feet back, frozen in place, eyes wide but posture controlled. He is black, in his late 40s, wearing a light jacket over a plain shirt, clearly just dressed enough to start his day. He looks less like a suspect and more like someone who has just been jolted awake by violence that makes no sense. The officer moves closer, the camera now tight enough to capture every detail of the man's face, the confusion hardening into something more focused as he takes in what is happening. His hands lift slowly, palms visible, not in panic but in a practiced, deliberate way. This is not his first encounter with authority. He knows how quickly things can spiral. He speaks calmly, asking the most basic question anyone would ask at that moment. Do you have a warrant? The words are steady, measured, and they hang in the air longer than they should. The officer does not answer directly. Instead, he steps closer, crowding the space, asserting presence. The camera angle compresses everything, walls closing in, the distance between lens and subject shrinking to almost nothing. It is no longer a room. It is a confrontation. The officer insists the entry is lawful. The phrase sounds rehearsed, like something repeated often enough that it no longer requires proof. Lawful entry, compliance, commands layered over one another, each one pushing the situation further past the point of reason. The man does not raise his voice. He does not resist. He simply states the truth as he understands it. They are in the wrong house. There is no warrant. This should not be happening. What the officer hears is not information. It is defiance. The man tries to explain who he is and why this is a mistake. He identifies himself as an elected county sheriff, a position earned through years of public service and accountability, not something claimed lightly. The body cam captures the moment his words land and fail to register. The officer does not pause to verify. He does not ask clarifying questions. He does not request identification in a controlled way. Instead, his posture tightens. Authority challenged is authority threatened, and the response comes fast. When the man reaches toward his jacket, the moment fractures. The camera jolts violently as the officer's instincts take over. A shout explodes through the small space, sharp and panicked, the word gun tearing through the air with a force that instantly changes everything. The officer's firearm enters the frame, dominating it, pointed squarely at the man's chest. The lens shakes, capturing raised hands, widened eyes, the sudden stillness of someone who understands exactly how close he just came to being killed for doing nothing more than trying to prove who he is. The man freezes mid-motion, one hand half raised, the other hovering inches from his jacket pocket. His voice stays steady, but urgency creeps in now, not fear so much as disbelief. He repeats himself, slowly, carefully, explaining that he was reaching for his badge, not a weapon. He is in law enforcement. He is not a threat. None of this matters. The gun remains trained on him, unwavering, a silent reminder that perception has replaced reality. This is the point of no return. The officer has already drawn his weapon. Backing down now would mean admitting the mistake, acknowledging that the situation escalated without cause. Instead, the commands intensify. Hands up. Don't move. Turn around. The man complies with every instruction, his movements exaggeratedly slow, each step calculated to avoid triggering another shout, another reflexive squeeze of the trigger. As cuffs click around his wrists, the camera remains close, capturing the tightness of the metal, the way his shoulders tense not from resistance but from the weight of humiliation. A black sheriff, elected by his community, standing cuffed in his own living room because officers broke into the wrong house and refused to stop once they realized something was off. Someone off camera mutters about confirming the address. The words come too late. The damage is already done. The man asks again for a warrant. No one produces one. He asks them to check his identification properly. The response is silence, punctuated only by radio chatter and the sound of boots shifting uncomfortably on hardwood floors. At some point, one of the officers finally looks at the badge pulled from the jacket pocket. The camera catches a glimpse of it as it's held up briefly, almost reluctantly. The seal is clear. The title is unmistakable: County Sheriff. The atmosphere in the room shifts, not into apology, but into tension of a different kind. The realization spreads quietly, like a crack forming under pressure. Instead of uncuffing him, the officers double down. Procedure must be followed, they see. The scene needs to be secured. They escort him out of his own apartment, past the shattered doorframe, into the hallway where neighbors' doors remain closed but not unaware. The body cam captures sideways glances, people peeking through cracked doors, witnessing a spectacle that will never make sense to them. A black man in handcuffs, police weapons drawn, no explanation offered. As he is led outside, the man's voice breaks the silence once more. He tells them plainly that this will not end quietly, that this arrest, this entry, this moment will be examined in detail by people who understand the law better than anyone in that hallway. He warns them that the city will pay for what they have done, not out of spite, but because the Constitution leaves no room for mistakes like this. If you're watching this right now, take a second and think about how quickly this escalated, how fast routine turned into disaster. And if you want to keep seeing stories like this broken down the way they actually happen, make sure you're following the channel so you don't miss what comes next. The patrol car door closes with a hollow thud, sealing the moment in metal and glass. Inside the vehicle, the body cam audio picks up the man's controlled breathing, the faint rattle of cuffs as he shifts slightly in the seat. He stares straight ahead, already replaying the last few minutes in his mind, already cataloging every violation, every missed step, every assumption that led to this point. Back at the apartment, officers begin to realize the depth of the error. Radios crackle with requests for supervisors. Someone mentions that the address might have been transposed, that the tip referenced a different unit number entirely. The words sound small compared to the consequences looming just ahead. Wrong house, no warrant, a gun drawn on an unarmed man who turned out to be a sheriff. None of it can be undone. By the time the supervisor arrives, the narrative is already collapsing. Questions come faster now. Who confirmed the address? Why was there no warrant? Why did the arrest continue after identification was offered? The body cam does not answer these questions. It simply records the silence that follows them. The man is booked briefly, the process cold and procedural, before reality finally catches up. Calls are made, names are checked, titles confirmed. Within hours, he is released without charges, but the damage is far from over. News of the incident begins to spread quietly at first, then louder, as details emerge that cannot be explained away. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a chain of decisions made without verification, without restraint, and without regard for the person on the other side of the badge. And as the city's legal department begins to review the footage, one thing becomes painfully clear. This case will not be settled with an apology. The patrol car ride is quiet in the way that only unjust situations ever are. No shouting, no resistance, just the low hum of the engine and the faint rattle of cuffs every time the car takes a turn. The body cam audio captures the sound of controlled breathing from the back seat, steady and deliberate, as the man who should never have been arrested stares forward through the metal cage, replaying every second of what just happened. Outside the car windows, the morning continues as if nothing is wrong. People walk dogs. A jogger passes on the sidewalk. Somewhere nearby, a coffee shop opens its doors. None of them know that a black elected county sheriff has just been pulled out of the wrong house at gunpoint because officers refuse to slow down long enough to verify an address. At the station, procedure takes over. Names are logged. Property is inventoried. The cuffs come off briefly, then go back on. An officer reads charges that sound hollow even as they're spoken aloud. Obstruction, disorderly conduct, failure to comply. Vague language meant to justify a decision already made rather than describe a real crime. The sheriff listens without interrupting. He has heard these words before, though never directed at him. He knows how thin they are, how easily they collapse under scrutiny. Still, he also knows that logic doesn't matter in moments like this. What matters is documentation, timing, and restraint. He gives his name. He gives his title again. This time, it lands differently. Someone at the desk hesitates. Another officer looks up from the computer screen. A supervisor is called, then another. The system begins to slow down, not out of fairness, but out of fear. Fear of what happens when the wrong person is pushed too far and the evidence is too clean to ignore. In a small interview room, the sheriff sits alone for nearly 30 minutes. The walls are bare. The chair is bolted to the floor. A camera in the corner records silently, indifferent to context. He does not pace. He does not raise his voice. He simply waits, because waiting is often the most powerful thing a person can do when they know the truth is on their side. Down the hall, the officers who made the arrest are telling their version of the story. Anonymous tip. Address confirmed. The subject reached for something. Officer safety. Each phrase is familiar, pulled from the same playbook that has been used to justify mistakes for decades. But today, the words feel brittle. There is body cam footage. There is hallway footage. There is a broken door that should never have been broken. A supervisor finally enters the room. His tone is different from the officers on scene, measured and cautious. He asks questions that should have been asked hours ago. Where exactly was the tip sourced? Who verified the unit number? Why was there no warrant? The sheriff answers calmly, clearly, with the precision of someone who has spent years testifying under oath. He explains that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, that his home was entered without consent or judicial authorization, that a firearm was drawn on him for attempting to identify himself. He does not embellish. He does not speculate. He simply states facts, because facts are enough. At some point, a phone call is made to county offices. Then another. Titles are confirmed. Employment verified. The weight of the mistake settles over the room slowly, like a pressure change. The arrest that felt routine an hour ago now feels radioactive. No one wants to touch it. No one wants to be responsible for what happens next. The charges are quietly dropped before they ever make it into the system properly. No announcement, no apology, just a quiet unlocking of the cuffs and a statement that he is free to go. The sheriff stands, straightens his jacket, and looks at the supervisor for a long moment. "This didn't have to happen," he says. Not angrily, not accusingly, just honestly. The supervisor nods, because there is nothing else to do. When the sheriff steps outside, the sun is fully up now. The morning has moved on without him. His phone buzzes immediately. Messages from colleagues, from staff, from people who have already heard whispers of what happened. He tells them he is fine, because physically he is. But something has shifted. Trust has been fractured in a way that can't be easily repaired. Back at the apartment, the door is still broken. Yellow tape hangs loosely around the frame, an afterthought. A neighbor finally asks what happened. The sheriff gives a short answer. Wrong house, no warrant, gun drawn. The neighbor shakes their head, unsurprised in a way that says everything. By afternoon, Internal Affairs opens a review. By evening, footage requests begin. The body cam tells the story without commentary, without emotion, just movement and sound, and decisions unfolding in real time. Analysts pause at the moment the gun is drawn, replay it frame by frame. They note the distance, the lack of threat, the failure to verify. Every detail that turns a mistake into a violation. If you're still watching right now, understand this part matters, because this is where most stories end quietly, swept away by paperwork and silence. But this one doesn't. Within days, attorneys get involved, not to threaten, not to posture, to document, to preserve, to make sure that what happened in that apartment cannot be rewritten later as something it was not. The city is notified. Risk management is looped in. Phrases like exposure and liability begin to appear in emails. The sheriff returns to work, but not unchanged. He sits in meetings where people avoid his eyes. He signs documents knowing exactly how fragile rights become when the wrong assumptions are made. He knows this case will not be about ego or revenge. It will be about precedent. Because if this can happen to an elected sheriff in his own home, with cameras rolling, it can happen to anyone. And that realization is what sets everything in motion. The real consequences don't arrive with flashing lights or shouted commands. They arrive quietly, behind closed doors, carried by emails marked confidential and calendar invites that suddenly include far more people than they should. By the time city attorneys sit down to review the incident, the narrative the officers relied on has already collapsed under its own weight. There is no competing version of events. There is only footage. The body cam is watched once, then again, then slowed down frame by frame. Every second matters now. The moment the officers step into the hallway, the lack of hesitation at the door, the absence of a knock, the fact that no one can produce a warrant because none ever existed. When the firearm enters the frame, analysts pause the video entirely. They study the distance between the officer and the sheriff, the positioning of his hands, the angle of the camera. There is no weapon. There never was. What they see instead is fear disguised as authority, assumption replacing verification. Internal Affairs opens a formal investigation less than 48 hours after the arrest. Not because of pressure, but because the facts leave no alternative. This is not a case that can be buried in procedure or softened by phrasing. The findings begin to stack up quickly. Wrong address, unverified tip, no exigent circumstances, no lawful basis for entry. Failure to disengage after doubt is introduced. Drawing a firearm without an articulable threat. Arresting a man who committed no crime. The language in the internal report is deliberately restrained, but the implications are devastating. Each violation is cited against department policy, state standards, and federal law. The report notes that the suspect identified himself as an elected county sheriff, attempted to retrieve identification, and was met with lethal force posture instead of de-escalation. It also notes that the arrest continued even after identity was reasonably apparent. That line alone changes everything. Within weeks, the officers involved are placed on extended administrative leave. Their access cards are deactivated. Their service weapons are secured. They are instructed not to discuss the incident with anyone outside official channels. This is the point where careers usually hang in the balance, where past performance reviews and commendations are quietly pulled from files and reconsidered under a harsher light. In this case, none of it matters. The video overrides everything. The civil lawsuit is filed in federal court and immediately draws attention inside City Hall. It is thorough, precise, and unforgiving. Page after page outlines constitutional violations in plain language, supported by timestamps and screenshots. Fourth Amendment unlawful entry, false arrest, excessive force, civil rights violations under color of law. The city is named as a defendant, along with the department and the individual officers. The complaint makes one thing clear. This isn't about a misunderstanding. It's about systemic failure. The city's legal team knows what this means the moment they read it. There is no qualified immunity shield here, no ambiguity, no conflicting testimony. The sheriff's attorneys are not bluffing, and they don't need to. A jury would see exactly what the cameras captured. The risk is not just financial, it's reputational, it's political. The first settlement offer is made quietly and deliberately low, as if testing whether the case can be made to go away cheaply. It can't. The sheriff rejects it without comment. The second offer comes higher, accompanied by language emphasizing resolution and moving forward. That is rejected too. Each counteroffer from the sheriff's legal team is calm, methodical, and grounded in precedent. Comparable cases, jury verdicts, the probability of punitive damages if the matter goes to trial. As negotiations continue, pressure builds from unexpected directions. City council members begin asking questions. Oversight committees request briefings. Advocacy groups file public records requests for the footage. The city realizes it cannot control the narrative indefinitely. The longer this drags on, the more likely it becomes that the footage will be seen beyond conference rooms and legal offices. They settled at $1.2 million, paid directly from city funds. The amount is significant enough to draw attention, but carefully calculated to avoid a courtroom. The settlement includes mandatory policy reforms, enhanced training on wrong address entries, stricter supervisory approval requirements, and an independent review process for future incidents. There is no admission of wrongdoing written into the agreement, but the payout tells its own story. The disciplinary outcomes follow soon after. 2 officers are terminated for cause, their certifications revoked after review by the state board. A 3rd resigns before termination is finalized, a move that changes little beyond timing. Their law enforcement careers effectively end, not with dramatic announcements, but with quiet administrative finality. Departments elsewhere take notice. Footage like this follows you. The sheriff continues his work, but the incident leaves a permanent mark. He speaks publicly only once, delivering a brief statement that sticks closely to the facts. He emphasizes that the lawsuit was never about personal gain. It was about accountability, about making sure what happened to him does not quietly become a template for what happens to others. The apartment door is eventually repaired. The splintered frame was replaced. The hallway returns to normal, but the memory doesn't. Neither does the footage. It exists now as a record, replayed in training, cited in policy discussions, referenced whenever someone claims that mistakes like this are rare or unavoidable. If you've watched all the way to this point, understand why stories like this matter. This outcome didn't happen because someone apologized. It happened because there was proof, cameras, documentation, the resources to fight back. Without those, this would have ended with an arrest record and no consequences at all. If you want to keep seeing how these situations actually end, not just the confrontation, but the accountability afterward, make sure you're subscribed. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because these stories aren't isolated to one city or one department. The officers thought they had the right house. They didn't. They thought authority would be enough. It wasn't. And when the footage was reviewed, the system had no choice but to respond.